Good evening. This is the September 16th meeting of the Financial Policies and Procedures Committee Working Group. I'm not sure exactly what the title of this team is yet. We're going to figure that out tonight, I guess. It's the first meeting we've had this fall, so we're kicking off tonight. We've got a policy that Steve Benuti has brought to the table to review regarding OPEB investment policies, and then we're going to get into the priorities and how we want to go forward with the policies and procedures this year. I will say that the team is made up right now of people from, we've got Board of Selectmen representation, FinCom, we're supposed to have somebody from school committee, and also the financial staff, treasurer and the finance director. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Steve to talk about first, to go through the OPEB investment policy update, which he had requested that we go through this, since this group exists now, to actually bring these other policy, financial policies through here as well for review.
Can I ask a favor first before we dive into
Sure.
any policies? Because like you even mentioned that you're going to talk about what even the name of the group is. That belies some basic ambiguities that perhaps are not resolved yet as to what this working group committee is,
Yep.
does, how it functions,
Right?
who it reports to,
Right?
who approves its policies.
Right?
So before diving into any specific policies, we want to sort through that. And if I'm just the only one that's ignorant on all this, slap me.
No, it's a logical approach. I was going to do this one because it was kind of a one-off and it wasn't part of, I just wanted to get to it tonight, quite frankly, Paul. And I thought this would be quick, and then we'd get into that.
This is going to be quick. I'm sorry.
The OPEB one?
Yeah,
The OPEB one?
a lot of changes. I had scanned it briefly.
You don't have
But I-
copies of that made, just what was emailed?
I did not.
I didn't make copies of that.
No, I don't think it's a quick
Yeah.
fix, that's for sure. We're not going to get done in one
You want to
meeting.
go into the details of the OPEB investment policy? Okay?
Yeah.
That's
All
what we're
right,
here for, right?
okay.
Well, talk about the changes.
No, that's true, absolutely.
This is not going to be a rubber stamp.
It's the
here.
small changes that have always been the bones of contention, when you notice them.
Yeah, for the financial policies, I understand that for this one. Okay, that's fine, that's great. All right, so then
This is a financial policy.
Okay, that's fine. Let's, we can do it that way then if you like. Let's take a step back and we'll go back to the organization of the team. This is my first year on it. So I don't have any of the history. What I have is the actual document itself, which is a financial policy. And what I have is the very last paragraph that just says it's supposed to be approved annually by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, and be reviewed annually also by the finance team, the town finance team.
So I apologize for coming in late, but did I miss anything?
No? No, we just started off, I just said we were going to organize. The whole idea tonight, it's not to get into the financial policies. I did want to do the OPEB because I know Steve wanted that reviewed. And then we would go into figuring out what our priorities were for the different people on the team for the financial policies and figure out a game plan from there. And then one of the things I also wanted to discuss was exactly what is the structure and governance for this committee.
Okay.
We came into being, I think it was in the winter of 2012, the financial policies had been referenced often, but hadn't been updated in a few years, so at one of the joint meetings we had, we agreed to set up a committee. I was at a selectmen meeting, and we agreed on a format, in addition to the financial staff, of 2 members of the FinCom, 2 members of the selectmen, 1 member of the school committee, and,
Light and water commissioners, too.
no,
The light and water commissioners.
they never participated, so I'm not sure if maybe we discussed having them. But anyway, we started meeting that spring, Chris would recall, and Jim would recall. And we went soup to nuts on a lot of topics, which I can get into later if you want. I found some of the old notes. But in the end, we ended up adopting a number of changes that were recommended by the financial team, as well as we had a lot of internal debate on some of the language, which ultimately was reflected on in a vote last October, I think, by the selectmen, and last November by the finance committee.
Was that voted on? Because nobody could find it in the notes, so we actually did vote
Yeah,
on it.
October 29th.
Yeah,
yeah.
October 29th? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it had already been done by the selectmen prior to that. We just reaffirmed it at a later date.
Okay.
So I think everybody has a copy of what was agreed on. I got a red line copy which shows what changes were made last year. But it involves stuff like stabilization, fund language that hadn't been in there before. There was a lot of debate over the funding of capital projects within and outside of. Yeah. There was a lot of that, too, yeah. But finally, we ended up on consensus language there. It was also, some of the OPEB language was entered for the first time, I think, last year. Is that right, Steve? So whatever changes you're making
No, the original policy is 2010.
on OPEB?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, those are probably, there were a number of other topics which we discussed and didn't reach conclusions on, so they remain on the table.
Are there notes or anything like that to say from last year?
Sure.
Like
There were-
published
there were
notes?
minutes
and so on?
taken.
Minutes, yeah?
Yeah.
And are, I mean, I haven't seen it. Do we have those? I don't know where to get those.
I don't know if we did minutes or anything, did we? No.
We did, because I submitted a bunch of them to the clerk at different times. But they were very brief.
Yeah, yeah. Well, where'd they go? I don't know. I mean, do we have a spot on the website, Bonnie, for that, or?
I don't know if the
we did,
clerk
really.
loaded them onto the
Maybe
website.
not.
Yeah, yeah,
If
okay.
not, I probably have most of it still on my
Okay.
computer.
Oh, that'd be
so I
good
can
if that's
send
more
it over.
background. That'd be good. Okay.
So, Paul, what process then you guys used last year? So discussions at this body, and then what would take place?
Well, part of the reason we were at least using, for a period of time, I don't know if it was ever formally changed or not, the topic of, or title of working group was that we would work collectively, and oftentimes we'd be at a round table either upstairs in one of the offices up there or even Light and Water, so it would foster everybody going over, the same language and the charts. And as we went through, I think we reviewed every topic at the existing policy. We went through everybody's topic ideas, went out and found language when we had something that we were interested in. I know I distributed last year, so this is probably, Betsy, you've got a copy, Jim. You have. There are a number of good resources out there, but the town of Northborough particularly had a model that is well-regarded, and I liked it because it includes one of the things that we don't have that they do have, which kind of just spells out like a user's manual for how the budget process works for the citizen. Anyway, we went out and found information there, and also members who wanted to find a resource for language would go to the gfoa.org website, Government Financial Organizations Association. That's the folks we're trying to get the accreditation from, is that right, Bonnie?
Yes.
Yeah. But most of the language is actually drafted by Steve and Bonnie for suggested changes. And then when we hashed it out internal to the group, we brought the drafts back to both boards, Selectmen and FinCom, and ultimately they were voted on by both groups. At that point, I think most of the discussion had been internal. By the time it got to the Selectmen of FinCom, it was pretty much no
Would give updates
argument
to the
with-
respective boards.
Right, that's right.
So, and then by the time the document actually made there, we voted upon it.
Yeah. So I've got some of those old memos that, even like the update ones, I got one in my hand right here from like July of 2013. If any of that stuff is of use, I could forward it along so that it would kind of spell out what the process was.
There's no real defined structure, though, at this point, right? It was just kind of as it happened, or it was traditional, this was the representation and so on, and this is how it worked.
Well, and it's bare
Working
bones.
group.
Yeah.
Working group.
Yeah, it's a working group, and the adopted policy itself, the last paragraph says that they shall be reviewed
Right.
and adopted annually by
Right.
both boards. So
Right.
theoretically, all we would be obligated to do is review it. If you're not going to make any
Right,
changes, go
right.
back to both boards and say,
Right.
there.
That's good.
And the thought was just to prevent what had occurred before from happening again, and that's to let, the policy sit there and people come and go on different boards, and they theoretically are in force, but people serve without even having
Know what they are, yep,
known what they are, never
Yeah.
mind voted on them.
right.
That and things change.
Things change,
Right, yeah,
You
those
know?
need to be revised.
Things
Absolutely.
change.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've been at it, I don't know, about a year and a half. We kind of went dormant during the regular budget season. We didn't pick up this summer as anticipated, but we've had some change in, membership too. So, where we go from here is entirely up to the group, I guess, as far as the time frame.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'd like to see, some targeted issues that are up front right now, OPEB obviously being one. Let's talk about TIF, because we have another request for a TIF, and I know we had spoke at selectmen's meetings previously about formalizing the way we do TIF, so that's something I think this group should
Right.
absolutely take a peek
It's on the
into.
priority list of the selectmen, right? It's
Yeah.
one of the things on the
Exactly.
priority list? Yep.
So, those are the only really two that I see of, other than just reading through the policy itself.
Yeah, I mean, other topics we looked at, we did talk about TIFs and pilot agreements, whether, coming up with that. I think in the end, we did not adopt any language on that.
Yep.
Topics that have come up since the last time we met, involve, whether or not we should have a policy on whether or not to submit a deficit budget to town meeting. The CPC oversight, I know there's been some language proposed for CPC in another respect in terms of funding. We talked at the last iteration of the committee about doing more real-time reporting online, but there was some resistance to that in different quarters for different reasons, but that was just to give a flavor of some of the things we were talking about. The costing out of collective bargaining, we've had those kind of agreements and discussions at the tripartite board level, but whether or not we should have something in our policies about that on collective bargaining, it was,
But one big thing was getting the briefing with the finance committee on the collective bargaining. That was the last go.
right, get financial review of policies. And then also how to handle non-department requests. And what is that? Well, that's exactly like what we've got on the table right now, the track. When things come that don't
fields.
neatly fall under a department.
Terse.
Turf fields.
Turf fields, turf, that's right, the track's,
Oh,
the
yeah.
previous example, right. The track is the track, right, the turf fields, but, budget orphans, for want of another term. Yeah. Everybody wants it, but they want it to be in someone else's ledger, yeah. So, I mean, that's just
Okay, so those are some of the priorities, but to go back to our actual structure, I mean, is it considered a working group? It's just informal? Is it one of these things where we're all supposed to go and get sworn in again to actually do this? Is it a committee? What do you want to do about that? What do you think about
before, I
that?
believe.
I don't think we did.
I think so, I think we,
Just did a working group?
well, I remember we had to keep minutes, and I remember being sworn in.
Who was subcommittee of?
Well,
Which committee, which board?
Selectmen effectively appointed us, or that was established at a selectmen meeting. Well, it was,
I don't remember getting sworn in
I don't
last time.
get sworn in, but
I don't remember
Yeah.
getting sworn in.
but I did, but whatever.
Yeah.
I know this may seem a tad bit tedious for the moment, but maybe just hashing this out from the get-go, next 15, 20 minutes perhaps, and then going on, and then it's crystal clear to all the participants. I mean, it goes so far as say, it's for the financial planning of all affected boards and committees. Who determines what's an effective board, affected, A, the letter A, not E, affected boards and committees? Who are they, for example? As we're going to adopt, we're saying this policy of the town of Littleton, but who is it affecting?
Everybody.
All?
Everybody.
So the planning board?
Everybody.
right.
Historical commission?
Townwide.
Anybody that's spent
Financial
money.
policies
finance-
have always existed prior to, well, not haven't always existed, but they existed prior to this group existing.
Yep.
So all we're doing is giving a process to updating and changing them.
First off, it's brilliant what you had all done previously. And don't disagree, and going forward is equally brilliant. All I'm trying to lay out is that who really is affected by this? If we consider, and all 7 of us think we know who it is, but I'm not so sure it's not something that should be very clearly codified. Conservation Commission,
Everybody is.
Yeah.
okay, so everybody. So then
Yeah,
we don't need
budget.
to say affected boards, just as an example. It's not dive down too much into the weeds of this piece for the moment, but it becomes, rather than affected boards and committees, it's all boards and committees in town.
Yeah.
And now next, do you have the authority to tell that to the school committee? Since they come under some very different mass general laws.
We even had, we had
They
discussion
schedule an
before about
appropriation for the town.
codifying.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So if they get an appropriation from the town, then the financial policies of the town affect that appropriation. They can do with that appropriation whatever they feel like.
I think it'd be wise to ask the school committee if they agree with that assertion.
Well, we
that they
do
would
have
get
a
an
We
appropriation.
do have a member, we do have,
Keith, you want to
Well,
speak?
the school committee is a part
Right,
of the group.
they're here.
of the working group, so they, you
Yeah.
can ask them in absentia, I guess, but the whole idea is that we have a common frame of reference that I dare say the big three would go by, and that is the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, and Finance Committee, not necessarily in that order, but that those three are the primary policy, financial policy-making groups in town. And it's important that all three have a common understanding of what the policies mean, or else we can't carry them out. For example, if the selectmen and FinCom in isolation said, we're gonna have a policy, we're gonna spend things this way, we're gonna put this much money aside for OPEB and whatever, and the school committee said, well, it's all well and good, but you know, we need another couple of $1 million for the operating budget, so we're gonna bring that to town meeting. We don't want that, we don't want to be on a different page about what the policy priorities are. It's been helpful to have a common understanding among those three groups that it's important to put money away for, you know, for OPEB, to have stabilization funds, to have fund balances, to do all of those things together that keep our bottom line strong. And the reason why I'm saying the big three, the Board of Selectmen appoints most of the other committees that are, you know, that would have budgets. Yes, there are a number of major players, including light and water. Yes, it's important to have them included as well, but ultimately, the primary policy makers, I think, are the ones who are represented at this table, who do get input from all of those affected boards. And moreover, we've seen, even in the case of separately elected boards, if the Board of Selectmen adopts, for example, a staffing vacancy review policy, we've had you know, it has not extended to schools or light and water, but all the other ones, Park and Rec, Library, Planning, Board of Health, all of the other elected boards that have budgets and staff, they come and comply with the policy that the Board of Selectmen has set in that regard. Number one, because it's prudent financially, and number two, because the selectmen and FinCom are the gatekeepers for the budget requests that go forward at town meeting. And those other boards recognize that it's important for them to be in the same, you know, to be singing from the same songbook as the rest of us for our common financial health. So,
I'd add 2 points, and I think that's a great point to raise, Paul. If you look at the actual policies, you'll see that the ones that are on the books right now, they all apply generally across the board. You know, most of them are for activity that isn't directed toward one department or another, and I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb going forward. But I've also thought, too, that, you know, because state law treats the schools differently, consistent with my idea that, like Northborough and some other towns, we ought to have a opening section that kind of explains the budget process. Part of that, you know, ought to be spelled out there, that, you know, most departments are bound by the town meeting line item vote. Schools are treated differently under chapter blah, 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 just so whoever's referencing this understands the rules of the game. So I think getting some of that language in there, while it doesn't do anything other than memorialize what's in the state law, is helpful in, you know, as we're setting the other policies. But we, you know, as a rule, haven't tried to adopt policies that target any specific group or anything.
No, however, it's been a very cooperative process.
Yeah.
And that's good. And I think what Keith described was a cooperative process, not a policy. In other words, what's the authority of the selectmen and the FinCom when it comes to that? You know, engendering that cooperative process, certainly, and that's part of the political process, which makes good sense to achieve that, and that the whole town goes in the same direction, which it has been. That's why there's so many things that as good as they are in town. But when we're writing policy, we should be cognizant of the authority of who's approving the policy and what they have over that.
It's rules we're imposing on ourselves, essentially. In the case of the financial officers, it's the rules they'd use in managing funds, investing funds, et cetera. And in terms of the selectmen and the finance committee, it's the rules we impose on ourselves through the budget process. Is that a fair way of describing it? Would you say, Bonnie? We're not really imposing rules on anybody else other than how we conduct our own financial policy, business.
Well, maybe that's what becomes the real purpose then, because now we just, in this discussion this evening so far, we said the effective boards are all. And by having that in the first place, effective means there must be some non-affected. Otherwise, why was
I
it
would say
like?
light department,
Say that again, please.
light department's probably not affected by this.
Except they are and they aren't, depending upon certain things.
From this,
Really independent.
Their funds, management of funds and all that.
management funds are covered in a different policy.
Oh, okay, there you go.
I mean, I'd like to make it as
Part of
prescriptive as
that would be
possible.
the OPEB policy.
Right. Well, they, as I was gonna say, certain parts of it do apply there.
So, because it is such a good idea, how do you write the policy strong enough so that it is enforceable? So that at some point in the future, where, hey, we're all human beings, and sometimes the cooperation may, waver a little bit, is, do we have a mechanism, and is this the tool that you use to enforce that mechanism, that other committees, boards, or whatever in town will adhere to it?
So that would suggest to me that we might want to start at the place of rereading our existing language to see if anything such as what you already cited jumps out as raising a question unto itself.
I'm almost,
Review the policy?
after having read it, somewhat thoroughly, it's only the purpose that my
Yeah.
discussion is. No, it's- why do
You're
we
a new
exist?
set of eyes, which is terrific. That's, hopefully every time we go through this iteration, somebody new will be sitting at the table and, and raise
Yeah.
points
The
like that.
meat as to what you're really trying to achieve each and every day, it's wonderful. When we get to that purpose, because that's the opening statement of this document, and who does it directly affect, so that when the selectmen and the finance committee approve it, what other boards and committees are required to adhere to it, through not just a cooperative process. And if that's all we have, we use it.
Yeah, so if you,
Could I make an observation on this? I think that the policy and the practice go hand in glove here, and because realize that the audience for the financial policy is not simply all of us, it's the bond rating market as well, because they look at what are your written policies and are you abiding by them? And so it's been important for us to write them down. In fact, if you go, we had, if you will, you had an oral tradition in Littleton for years where the finance committee had certain values that it imposed on the budget process, and you lived by those for many years. The bond rating agency said, that's great, I'm glad you have those practices, but you know what, you got to write them down too, and have policies that you can point to. So we wrote them down, we got credit for that, but the continuing credit comes not only from the written policy, but then adhering to what you're doing. And, I dare say, there's no law that says that you write a policy and everyone must adhere to it. That's where the practice comes in. That's where it's a working, living document where you've got to be in continual contact with the affected groups, the school committee and, and the others in town, so that the spending the town meeting does, and that's the other thing. These policies all go towards, the test is town meeting spending. The test is what you bring to town, is what the town meeting votes on. And that our operating procedure is that we want to go to town meeting with a united front of what the spending plan is. And so I think the two things go together. We haven't seen much of a rogue or renegade board bringing forward, some big spending proposal that isn't on the radar screen. Everyone gets it, that they need to come through a process, and that you don't see town boards anyway going, and submitting their own articles or getting petition articles for their own projects. You do see some things that the community members want, like the track before and like the turf fields now, where there's a groundswell from the community. And even on that, our task is to figure out what's the best way to capture that desire and translate it into the best spending plan. So that's sort of You know, it's the written policies, but it really is the practice of how you communicate that's just as important.
So I'm not sure where you're going with this, Paul, to tell you the truth, so.
I'm going to take it to a
Yeah.
conclusion for this evening.
Okay.
Is policy that you can codify the best possible is, as we all know, the best thing to do. The purpose as written now is taking us down a good track to begin with. I would say it could be tightened up.
Yeah.
With some thought as we're going forward. And because this is the Financial Policy Working Group, understanding the purpose, or at least that we all seem to be of the same mind, at least within a matter of degrees, is where I'm taking this. I think we are there with the discussion, but I'm not going to belabor the purpose this evening, but I think it's something that we should tighten up as to how we make it applicable across the town. Because as it is now, for all affected boards, for me personally, it's meaningless, because I'm on a board, whatever, well, I'm not affected by that. We're sitting here saying all of them, but if we went to each one of them, would they say that this policy actually applies to them? And maybe we make it 100%, north-south head shakes. But we should
Yeah, so
know
maybe-
rather than yes.
I'll tell you, I'm just noticing the version that I'm referencing is the one that we presented to the boards last year, which bolded out new language. That purpose was one of the new things. So that wording has only been on the books for a year. So if there's if a reading of it now a year later suggests it can be written better, fine. That's an idea. Maybe it is, these policies apply across the board to all towns and departments as state law allows, or, as is spoken to in state law, whatever, something along the line.
Personally,
Okay, so
I have
I
no
can
problem
do-
doing that, to be honest with you. That almost says, because as the finance team, Board of Selectmen and the FinCom, saying, hey, the rest of the town, here's what we think's the best way to do it, and we'd rather you not think you may or may not be in it, we want to tell you you are in it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put basically the wording for some of this stuff as one of the priorities we're going to deal with this year, right? So that'll be one of the topics we address as well as the content of the policy itself. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, good. Because I don't think that's, I agree, we need to do that, and it should be as tight as it can be, and everybody ought to be in agreement on it. But it's not like that's broken right now, right? More or less, this is kind of working for us, so I have it on the list, but it's not the top one, probably.
Is it a case that we've been, well, first I am new.
Me too.
Yes, so there's two of us new. And it hasn't met for some time.
Right.
So I think, everybody comes to a common understanding.
Yeah,
which
no,
is fine.
absolutely. No, and Paul's right. It's great to have new people look at it. I mean, believe me, I went through the whole thing, and I had all kinds of stuff I'm writing in there saying, what's this and what's that? So, we absolutely always need to do that.
Maybe to include some language in the purpose about the Finance Committee's recommendations will be based on these types of policies. That might firm it up, because you do make recommendations on all of the,
But even more applicable is the day-to-day decisions that you guys make is really where a lot of this stuff is applied. So I'll agree that the language should be looked at again, but it maybe ought to be a little more circumspect.
Thank you.
Okay. So, so I wrote down the items that Jim and Paul and other people have mentioned here in terms of topics to address this year. I know there's others that are in here from Steve and Bonnie. I don't know if you want to list them down individually as we walk through it quickly, and just so I just had titles on here, so we have the complete list of options, so we can then talk about priorities. Does that make sense, or is that going to be hard to do? Pardon? Oh, you want to do you want to go back to the OPEB one first? I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to
Okay.
get this to the
You wanna get that
selectmen, and
done. All right,
the
we can
water
do that.
commissioners meeting is
For you,
next
Steve?
week.
Okay.
So,
All right, so we had some of this all, yeah, I still have on my list of things to do. I still think we have more work in addition to the wording in terms of our actual structure and governance, exactly what we are. I think we need to tighten that up as well. But I'll add that to the priority list. Okay, why don't you, I'll let you take it. So now we're switching gears here now. We're talking about the OPEB investment policy, of which I'll let you give a little history of it and what we're doing the updating here, so everybody understands.
so this is the first major rewrite of the OPEB policy since it was approved initially by the Selectmen and the Light Commission is back in 2010 when we started the fund. Mostly, you're right, Paul, there's a lot of red line on this. And the reason why is because a lot of the verbiage was taken out of the policy itself and put into addendums in the back. So it instead of defining everything in words, it just put table. So I can go through and talk to that. First major change is in the strategy section,
Page
page
This is-
3.
Page 3 on the red line version.
Okay, I don't have a printed copy, I thought we'd be getting one, but, Steve, so this is not part of the financial management policy,
No, this is a separate investment policy.
which we never looked at last year,
This is,
period.
this is,
2010, you said?
Yeah.
this
Well,
was originally
I would-
brought by the,
Okay, I would think any set of policies you ought to have ought to be complete, that we're reviewing, not a
that's
financial.
why I'm bringing this into this committee before I brought it to the selectmen.
Okay, but I'm just wondering if this has been around since 2010, I mean, I'd never seen it before.
That's right, that's why I'm bringing it to the committee with this major
Okay,
update.
all right, well, I don't mind going through it tonight, but I guess I'd kind of like to have a hard copy to go at before we act on it, but.
That's it. Page 3, the strategy section. This is talking about the asset allocation guidelines that we have in the investment of the OPEB funds. And as I just mentioned, we're taking all this verbiage out that's on page 3 through 4, onto page 4, and replacing it with the addendum number 1, which outlines the allocation targets by category of our investment with a minimum, target, and maximum. I've worked with Bartholomew over the past 8 months or so in coming up with these new allocation targets and redeploying some of the funds according to these allocation targets. So these are in effect right now. And I was able to do that because of the language in the existing policy that says that the treasurer has the ability to do that on a short-term basis. So we took those out. The diversification, a lot of the language on the equities and the fixed income, we just take it out and redone with some updated language as to what is applicable to purchase in those different categories and what we can't. We've added a section on alternative investments, which wasn't there, and we're minimizing the cash and equivalents, as you can see.
And the values changed a little in some cases.
On the allocations? Yeah, the mix of the investments is changing. A little bit more of a aggressive approach on the funds than was taken before, since these are really long-term. And we want to make sure these funds grow, so the more it grows, the less we have to put in.
So,
It's done very well, too. We're probably around, in total return on what we put in, about $800,000 in total return. We're just approaching $5 million total.
yeah, my read, you're changing values of the allocation towards more aggressive, and it's a modest move towards that.
Yeah.
I think is plenty fine.
Yep.
Just want to make sure we all understood that.
Page 7 talks about some of the risks and just some updated language on what these risks are and how they apply to the town and how we're really handling them as we move forward. Credit risk, for example, we can unlimited in U.S. Treasuries and government agencies and things like that. Let's see. Nothing really else until we get down to the relationship with financial institutions,
Page.
page 8 is the next change. We added a bullet item about checking brokers through FINRA, which is an organization that they need to belong to. And it kind of just gives an update as to the performance of those brokers.
I think it's a good idea. Why is applicable, though? Why not just an annual review? Period. That's why the caveat at the end is applicable.
And just cut it off at annual review of all advisors?
I think
Yep, we could do that.
destroyed stronger language.
This is just giving a mechanism to review them, that's all.
Whenever, as applicable, I'd take it as whenever you want. You do the review,
Okay.
instead of an annual.
Performance measurement, one of the other addendums, addendum number 3 of the policy, establishes a benchmark based on our allocation targets. And this is how we can measure the performance of the fund against these benchmarks. So it's a blended benchmark now that we've come up with based on those targets that are in addendum number 1, where we hold the investment advisor to those benchmarks, because they're telling us they can perform better than those benchmarks in the long run, is what their goal is. And that's the only one, except for the addendums 1, 2, and 3 are all new. As I said, addendum 1 is the target allocations by category. How it used to be was just give a high and a low range with a normalized value with pretty wide spreads. This brings it in with our target allocation. For example, equity is at 55%. We have that swing to go at 45 to 65 min-max, but we know exactly what our target is. And we can vary from that depending on what happens with the market. Definitions, it just has a clear understanding between the town and the investment advisor where certain investments fit in the different categories. If they're purchasing a Pacific Asia emerging market note, we know where it fits in our allocation grid based on this chart. And addendum 3, again, is our benchmark. So it looks like there's major changes. It's really just taking a lot of the words out and putting them into addendums, strengthening some of the allocation targets in that way, giving us a better guideline to go through with the benchmarks. So this policy has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Light Commissioners, because under state law, the Light Commissioners can name their own custodian. They've named the town treasurer as the custodian. The town treasurer and assistant treasurer are responsible for the investment of the OPEB funds.
So you don't really need our approval, you're just looking to bring it through this board since we were doing this because it was the right thing to do, more or less.
Yes. Well, just like any policy, it has to go to the
Right, and so.
to the Board of Selectmen for approval.
Right.
So if this committee has any questions on the policy, any changes you'd like to see before it goes to the boards, that's kind of why it's here.
Having not seen it before, it sounds reasonable. I'd like to personally just have a chance to look at both the original document and the changes, for a week. And I'm curious, are there other financial-related policies that aren't part of what I had thought was a complete package under
There are,
financial?
and it's on the list of things to discuss
Okay.
and to bring in. Or into, so, yep.
So are there questions on the changes? Or?
If I could ask you this,
Absolutely.
page 9, supervision, you changed, it's the third bullet, the treasurer will provide a report to the finance director and finance committee on a quarterly basis, change to semi-annual, detailing any exceptions to this policy. Since the Board of Selectmen is going to approve the policy, could we make it that any time there is an exception to the policy? So if you gave the semi-annual at the last meeting, let's just say, and now 6 months go by before you report on an exception to the policy. Is there any reason we can't just, when there is an exception to the policy, report it at that time?
Sure.
No, I mean,
it's.
Don't just acquiesce
I'll
if
give you
there's a
an
good reason
example
not
of what an
to.
exception to policy is. So in the town's investments, for example, the town's investment policy says that we won't purchase a bond if it's less than AA. And we could purchase a bond that's BBB. We won't purchase a bond that's less than BB. We could purchase a BBB. if something happens to that company, it falls after we've purchased it to a double, for example. So now that becomes an exception to policy. We'll monitor that. When we purchased it, it was fine. We're not going to sell that investment because it doesn't meet our policy, but it's kind of on our watch list. If something still happens to degrade that bond in value a little further, then we'll take actions to do it. But in essence, it's on our watch list. So we report that to the Finance Committee semi-annually, saying and on the report that you guys get, it shows all the cash positions of the town, it shows any exceptions right now, of which there's none, I believe, in the last report. But that's the type of thing that would fall into that. So we wouldn't purchase something outside of these policy guidelines, but something could happen after the fact to make it fall out of policy.
And plus, it gives you quite a degree of latitude based on the reasonable man approach, which makes perfect sense. So the example you
That's
gave-
more of the types of investments on the prudent man, and, yeah.
So you can come up with 1,000 examples in that infinitum as to exceptions to policy. My point is that if the selectmen are the ones approving the policy, I don't think the Board of Selectmen should have to wait 6 months to find out an exception was made. Because, as we're not saying approve the exception, because you have that ability, it's just you're reporting it to the selectmen that it's happened. I don't think they should be sitting on something for 6 months, up to 6 months. The example you gave is a very minor one.
It's, if something happens like that, you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm watching it, and the investment advisor is on call to make sure they're watching it
Oh,
also.
it's just information, because
Yep.
again, it's not the Board of Selectmen not approving it. It's just information to them, that's all I'm asking.
Okay.
How often does something
So would
like
you
this
rather
happen?
see it semi-annually? Or quarterly?
I would ask that, because I would have gone down from the quarterly even to, is if at the next, and there's judgment on your part too. Like, boy, you just had to do something very big. That's a huge exception to this policy. It's maybe a note to Keith and to the chairman immediately, or it's at the next scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting. And I don't even think you need to be present to do it. I'm more of the mind that even a note, communication from the treasurer to the chairman that, policy, 6B-2-1, being somewhat officious there, but I don't know, folks.
No, that's fine. That's it, all that.
No, I'm good. So, I mean, any exception to this policy wouldn't happen anyways unless it falls afterwards, as the example you gave.
Yes.
So, it's very rare anyways.
Yeah, how often does it happen?
It's happened once so far,
Once in what?
since I came, 2008.
So once in 6 years, so not really much to worry about. So,
I'm not worried.
yeah, right, but I mean, like you said, you should
And that was
find
just,
out sooner than 6 months.
and that was just the bond being downgraded. That's all it was. We sat on the bond till maturity and
Okay,
nothing
right.
happened.
So it's very rare, so, okay. Good to know.
Steve knowing about it is the main thing.
Right, like, and he does, right, so.
But
the
anyway,
thing is,
okay.
It doesn't happen very often.
All right, so I'll add some language for that, on that bullet. I'll expand that bullet. Okay.
And now understanding your addendums, I think, makes this a little bit easier for me to digest also.
And it makes it easier for us to manage, too.
Yeah.
It's easier looking at a chart than to have to go through page upon page of it.
I guess my question's on, you talked about the targets, and I think you said something like you could be in between 45% and 65%, and we're at like 55. Like, where are those guidelines? Like, what are you referring to as far as, between 45 and 65%? Is that like, where is that coming from? Is there like some sort of state guidelines as far as that works, or?
No, this is the allocation that we've selected to manage that portfolio. So the state guidelines under that prudent man investment
Yeah,
rule
okay,
says you can basically manage it how you wish.
okay.
knowing, making sure that you understand the investments that you go into.
Okay.
So we've set those targets
Yeah.
between the town and the investment advisor. Say, for example, equities can be between 45 and 65%
Yeah, right, which is what, right,
of
right.
total.
Yep, yep.
The best place to be would
Right,
be
right,
in that
no, no,
target
yeah,
allocation. But as markets change, you may want to jump out of equities and go into bonds.
Okay, okay. Fair enough. Good to know.
So is it, we'd
Jim, are
like,
you reading through this, or?
No, I thought I had a question, but I can't find it.
so is it, we'd like another reading before recommending approval or recommending forwarding? What would we like to do?
What is your Light and Water
The
Commissioners?
light and water meeting is on the 24th.
We, both boards, Selectmen and Finance Committee, are meeting scheduled to meet next week, 22nd and the 23rd.
Okay.
Before one of those two meetings, we could do another one of these 6 o'clock meetings. I would, of course, that's the other thing we haven't discussed, is what times work. I mean, in previous iterations, meeting before the meeting seems to work, but that we might want to address. And, at our next meeting, finalize this, since it's time sensitive, but I'd also like to recommend that we just reread the existing policy, so we spot out, read it aloud. It's not that long. See if we spot out areas where the language is unclear, and we know we have some draft recommended language changes. If we have time in that same meeting, go over those, but that should be in the next order of priority.
Are we talking about the OPEB policy now, or the other one?
No, the other one.
You're going the other one now?
Yeah, the OPEB one was the first thing I covered,
Okay.
yeah.
And so you want to have another full meeting, not just a short one to button this up for Steve, but to have a full policies meeting before the next selectman meeting, the joint
Well,
selectmen
either
meeting?
that meeting or the, one of those days next week, Monday or Tuesday,
Okay,
and just get under the next steps.
okay, so you're just talking about the next meeting, just in general?
Yeah,
Okay.
in general.
All right,
But especially time sensitive to
Right.
his desire to get this
Right.
before the light and water.
I think the selectmen meeting, the joint meeting, though, you have something early before, it. You have an executive session or something before the full one? We'll have to look at the schedules, we'll work that out
22nd?
anyway.
No, I don't think so.
Work that out, no, on the
We
22nd?
started on the 22nd, the selectmen's meeting starts at 7.
Okay, it does, okay. I
And
thought I saw something else.
we're proposing joint meeting with,
Yeah, everybody.
Bunch of
yeah.
us.
Bunch of
yeah,
folks.
Actually, yeah, a couple. The one that we're proposing with the selectmen and school committee would be from 7:15 to 7:45, and then at 8:15, the turf fields
Okay,
discussion.
okay. So there's a couple different joint sections in there.
And maybe we're mixing some apples here, so to speak. You presented this as a courtesy to this particular board this evening.
Well, I think all the financial policies should probably come before this board at some point in time,
And at
and
least-
this one was at
Perhaps
the
not-
top of the list
Perhaps not consent,
because.
but at least advice.
We're here to review.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of what's, should there be one document that contains all those policies?
That's another discussion, right, absolutely. And like I said, there's others, as
Right.
Lauren.
And what's the sense of,
Been
being
interesting,
open and debate on one of them and then not spending as much time on the other? I mean, I'm not suggesting anything other than let's be complete. So,
Right, but it's a good start, it's
Yeah.
the first start, better than not doing it at all, so
That's-
it's, okay?
that's right.
What you
Absolutely.
don't have to do?
We have a single, complete 200-page document with all of the selectmen's adopted policies, and that's where this one is, that's where the financial one is. We can share, it's online, we can share it with you, and if there's anything else that you think you should be reviewing, it's in that it's the only policies we have, the written ones are in that document.
Okay, but within that, you probably know right off the bat what ones have financial impact and what don't, right?
What Paul is saying is, to take all those independent policies and kind of.
Right, but what I'm saying,
Under one
yeah,
umbrella.
right, what I'm saying is the universe exists. and
Okay,
it's only
right.
200
I assume that
pages.
exists.
It's only 200 pages long.
We were just looking at the five-page subset, but there are other little five-page
And-
subsets we
and
should have been
can-
looking at,
And
too.
we will go through that document and see if there isn't anything else that
Yeah,
falls into
good,
that.
that's all the question was.
You're eager to get this in front of the boards because,
Because we're managing the portfolio to this right now.
is that an exception to policy?
No? Yeah, you can do it on a short-term basis, right?
It'll become one.
My other thought is, tonight is Tuesday, isn't it? And Monday is 6 nights away, and some of those nights don't count for meetings. So to get another meeting between now and the Board of Selectmen meeting seems difficult.
We'll probably do it before.
Do it
We'll probably do
before.
before, we'll probably do it Monday
We
before,
do it
before
6
Board of
a.m.,
Selectmen,
6
we'll do 6 o'clock Monday.
for our meeting?
That works.
It's tough.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Make arrangements, it's just,
Well, you know, as I say, that just worked with the previous
You know.
group, so whatever, you gotta, you know, make some suggestions about what times work.
but we'll get to.
If we just take,
this.
table everything else that the group is gonna do. Do one more read-through on here, give everybody the opportunity to look at it, read through it, and try and understand it. It doesn't have to be 6 o'clock, 6:30.
6:30 would be fine,
Yeah, it's
right.
gonna be 20 minutes, we're gonna talk about it and say, Steve, go.
I agree with that, limit the scope of that particular meeting to
Yeah.
this one notepad.
Right.
And to push it forward, leave it a little further, individually, if you have things that you see in the policy, send them to me so I can have things addressed.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Steve, do you have a target date for adoption of that revised policy?
The Light Commissioners meet on the 24th. I'd like to
Yes.
get it to that, and then the Selectmen on the 3rd.
We have August, or October 6th. Yeah,
6th.
so that's the next, okay. So we'll plan on that then. Thank you.
Okay, now what about regular, we're running out of time here, so we're not gonna get through a lot of this other. So 6 o'clock is tough for you, for working in general. So you'd rather just do it on another night and do a 7 o'clock meeting rather than do it, which is fine, whatever
You do it
works
at
for
the tail
everybody.
end of a FinCom meeting too, our meetings don't always run that late.
I turn into a pumpkin, though, I don't care. You don't want any emails from me after a certain time of
Six
day.
I'm gonna get back from work too, so.
That's right, that's what I said, so we pick
As a
another
working
night.
group, morning sometimes can work for me, but it probably doesn't work for some other people, so.
6:30, Jim?
Yeah, we'd be, that half hour works.
But it still means it's another night, though, because just 6:30 to 7, and we're not gonna get anything done, right?
It might work
We have
in
to
this,
do another
on
night.
this one instance, it might work.
And that's fine for the OPEB, but in general, I'm just talking about now, just in general, for these policy meetings, I think sounds like we're gonna have a lot of work to do this year, so. When do you want to meet?
It's also gonna be next year and the year after that.
That's
so
right,
you don't
not gonna
have
be all this year, it's priorities this year.
You don't have to bite all the apple.
Good news is, things are good, we're making them better.
So
Right,
that's
exactly.
all
Not
this is.
broken, things are good, we're making them better.
It's a review, we're not writing, it's a review.
All right, so we can expect to be scheduled for
So
probably
Wednesday or
Monday.
Thursday, what's a better, we'll work on that, I'll work on Monday for that, but in general, Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, what's better?
Doesn't matter.
Or-
Thursday night
Are
football.
you okay now? Thursdays used to be really bad, but not anymore.
Right. Yeah, we
Actually,
could, of course, we'd like to
Thursday night's better
accommodate
for me.
Mike, if he
Wednesday's better for
can.
me, actually.
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
Wednesday.
Wednesday good? Wednesdays? So we'll do, plan on maybe a couple a month for the next couple months?
See where it
Let's
goes.
see how it goes.
Okay.
Instead of saying a couple
Yeah,
of
point of
months, let's see
departure. Yeah, for these planning purposes.
We have, coming up on holiday season. and so
I know,
Well,
quickly.
we'll
So-
figure out what our scope of work's gonna be pretty
Right.
quick.
Right, just one thing from you all perspective, or anybody's perspective, is there anything in here that you feel needs to be addressed soon in terms of fall town meeting?
No.
No? Okay, all right, I just want to be clear on that. Okay, good, good, all right.
Policy.
Hmm?
That's just-
Oh, it's policy, right, yeah, okay.
So we say Monday at 6:30?
Yes,
OPEB.
okay. All right, thank you, everybody, we'll close this one, and then we'll start up again in a few minutes. Thank you.
I give you guys.
Yeah, we haven't actually met.
We don't have our nameplates
Yeah.
tonight, fortunately.
Oh, that's right. Oh, there we go. I think of nameplates. Okay, as we get the nameplates, welcome, good evening. This is a September 16th, 2014 meeting of the Finance Committee. And first on the agenda tonight is, it's passing out the name tags, is Scott Edwards. And Ivan, I'm not going to say your last name right.
It's Pagasic, it's a tough one.
Pagasic,
Yep.
okay, thank you. I've seen it in email a million times, now I know, Pagasic. Here from the Light and Water Department to talk about their current status and some of the plans they have for moving forward,
On the water side.
on the water
Correct,
side.
Yes, yes, yes.
Specifically on the water side.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
I do have a handout. You know, I met with Fred a while ago, and we started looking at some of our financials on the water side, which were new to me. I've been in the light department side for 20-some years, but I started looking, and, you know, Fred's been a big help. He attended our last commissioners meeting. So what we did is we kind of looked at a kind of a 5-year plan, where we are now, kind of where we want to be, looking at expenses, capital and revenue. And this is really something that the full board hasn't
Thank you.
even seen yet, for the water commissioners. But we just thought we'd, you know, Fred invited us in to just kind of go through some of this. And, you know, basically, I think that, you know, the real issue is, you know, our reserve funds have been spent down. We've only got about, at the end of the fiscal year 14, $128,000. So I've been working over the last few months with staff, looking at, you know, capital projects that we need to do in our system to maintain the system, keep up with the growth, which is, you know, fairly substantial with some of the new projects coming in. So what we kind of did is we looked at, you know, what our kind of reoccurring expenses are year by year. That's at the top. And then, you know, the next down is you know, some of our capital projects that need to be done. There's a couple, you know, fairly large ones in there, but you know, and then below that we look at our revenues and what comes in from rates, connection fees, some of the other charges like sprinkler demand and things like that. Our cell tower money that we receive, and then, you know, some of our testing that actually is a negative revenue. So if you can see that this first page is our base plan. Ivan likes to call it the do-nothing plan. If we, you know, if we keep everything the way it is right now, you know, we make these investments into the system, you know, you can see at the bottom that we're, you know, we go negative pretty quickly.
Maybe we should talk about some of these investments, the capital, the projects.
Sure.
And
Yep.
what those ticket items are.
Yeah, I mean, most of them, year 2016, we have the Cedar Hill standpipe. It needs some reconstruction, needs to remove lead paint, and we're kind of under orders of DEP to do that. Should have been done by now, but we've been pushing it off a few years. So that's, if you see in 2016, under production and treatment and capital, that's a big hit there. Then in the following year, we have some big expenses at our spec pond treatment well, which is the older treatment plant, I mean, that's the older plant. We've got some replacements to do up there to keep that up to 100% capacity. And then really the biggest on here is what we're planning for is a new well site, Cobb's Well, which is over off of Neshoba. We do have a test well there now, and we're going to work toward that production well. That's, the DEP is actually, we had a grant last year to start to look at that well, and we're trying to get another one this year to further those studies, but the DEP is really pushing us in that direction. It's a deep bedrock well. It's in a different watershed than our other wells. And it appears to be a really good, clean source of water. So that's kind of the 5-year capital plan. I met with Ivan the other day, and I spent a lot of time with staff. And these are really, this capital isn't like a wish list. This is really stuff that needs to get done. I mean, to keep our water quality, to keep the quantity and the quality of water, this stuff all needs to get done. It's not, any pie in the sky stuff. It really needs to happen.
And part of that too is the side of 495, Cobb's well is needed because we pump a lot of water from the other side of Littleton to this side. And with the projects going on this side, it's going to strain our resources even more. So it's inevitable we need to have that capacity going forward.
What's the location of Cobb's Well?
Right up in Neshoba Road, in that area. So, the 15 Great Road, that project, that's one of the projects. That again, we have to pump water from this side over there. And the beauty, as Scott mentioned, Cobb's Well comes from a different aquifer, right?
Different watershed, yeah.
Different watershed,
Yeah.
which is huge.
And it's a bedrock well, but all the other wells in town are sand and gravel. And, over a period of time, we built up the iron, the manganese, and, we just added a treatment plant to deal with, that. But it's inevitable that we've got to do something. And we're lucky, that's a great source. It really is. It looks like it's going to be a real winner. But it takes a while to develop a well, between the testing and the DEP approvals and things like that. So, we've started down that road, but we really need to get there. So if you look at this number one, this base plan, obviously, that
Excuse me, Scott.
you can't get there.
Does the base plan include the actions that you asked the water commissioners to vote in, and they did, I believe, on I think it was the hookup fees?
The connection
Connection
fees,
fees.
right, you can see that.
And also the fire.
Demand, yep.
Demand fees.
Yep.
Yep.
So could you just spend a minute and talk about the actions you've already taken to try to help get better here?
Sure. What we did is we looked at our connection fees, which are fees that any new customer has to pay to connect to our system. Hadn't been changed since 2002. So I took a look at those and looked at really what's the cost of new water. Because we don't want to, as new customers connect, and we have to, go and find these sources and treat the water, we don't want existing customers to have to pay for that. So it's a one-time fee when you connect. So what we did is we came up with a new connection fee schedule. It was voted in at the last meeting at the end of August. And it's about double what our old connection fees were. And it's going to apply to developments like the Point, Sand Park project. We're not real sure if it's going to apply to 15 Great Road or not, because of the 40B language. We're kind of.
But it's commercial and residential.
Yeah.
It's across the board.
Right. So I actually didn't even include the 15 Great Road. I put them in at the old rate in here. But you can see the next 2 years, we have substantial revenue from connection fees. And, really our thought is the connection fee should be money that goes into the bank that you use for future development of your water sources. It really shouldn't be used for your operation and maintenance.
Which is,
The fees this fee schedule that you put in doesn't put us way out of line with surrounding towns or whatever. We're
No.
sort of actually not at the top. We're
A little below.
a little below.
A little below.
Yeah,
So we aren't penalizing, we're just bringing up to where
Right.
you think we should be.
Right.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and they're all defendable because you know, you kind of look at, you know, what the cost of water is. You look at, you know, what you have, what your plant value is and what you've spent, what you need to spend to improve it, so.
And I just wanted to ask, you got to the point where the reserves were really low. This wasn't because of some one-time thing, that this is just, it's been going down as you've gone along, it's just these issues just haven't been addressed.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I mean, you know, at one time, I was cleaning Savis's office out and I found some old budgets. And at one time, there was $1.5 million in surplus, you know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you know. But, you know, there's been significant improvements to the system.
Right.
You know, you know, there's been two treatment plants.
treatment
and
plants since
we
then,
put a new
right.
Oak Hill water tank. So, you know, there's been some improvements, but we've got some catching up to do, you know. If you go to the next page, what we've had some discussions is in a lot of the towns, the water departments are doing this now. If you look down under revenues, we added a debt service charge to our rates. And what that is it's a fixed fee for the customers. You know, you know, as an example, I put in here $100 a year per year for a residential customer. And that gets us, you know, about $400,000 a year. And, you know, that's really designed to go toward debt that we've already incurred.
Rather than a flat fee, what's this, per household?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there much discussion of instead doing it on the rate where it actually affects usage?
Well, the only issue with that is, we have a fixed debt, and if you put it in the rates, every year with the usage changing, you don't really get the fixed revenue to match the debt. So what we're trying to do is match the two up. So that was kind of our thought. It would be actually to every customer's commercial and everything. Commercial customers obviously pay more than residential. But it would be.
Well, would they hear?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It's-
But the $100 per household, I mean, I'm a very low volume user. My annual bill's probably $120, so this doubles my,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
but
The average-
Ivan and all his kids probably run the shower all day long, you know?
Mine's
Yeah.
$80 a year. You must have a leak.
I might have a leak, though.
You better turn them down, right?
Yeah. Our average residential water bill is right around $580 a year.
Yeah.
Pretty significant. That's the average.
Yep, that's about right.
And we're actually, if we look at all the surrounding towns, we're in the bottom
But if that's
third.
the case, then I know that, you know, just personally, that some people must be way lower, than the range must be huge.
Yeah.
So how does $100 a
Yeah.
household come across fairly when the range of usage is all over the place?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know, I mean, you must be really at the low end of the
Oh, I
range.
am.
We
Yeah.
sure don't
Yeah.
see many of those at
Yeah.
all, but, you know, there's quite, I forget what, but there was 80% of the residents were right in that bandwidth, you know, there's quite a few.
He bathes in the creek out back.
Right.
Yeah, right. But again, let's reiterate that we have multiple scenarios here. So we're here to educate what the impacts are to doing different things, so you can see, you know, what those impacts are and what the adjustments
Right.
would be. But Paul, you're absolutely right. When you get into this, you're gonna see that water rates are going up, okay? And things are going up, and water bills are gonna go up, that's inevitable.
Well, rates, you know, I accept that, you know, there's a formula for that. It was just this, you know, static $100 per year per customer. It just doesn't seem to be too scientific.
It's interesting, with the Mass Water Works put out a publication that they took from the state. The state did a big study about water rates. Because, you know, the state really is driving a lot of they drive all the regulations. How much water you can pump, what's the quality of your water. They're coming out within, in 4 years, they're coming out with, it'll affect us in 4 years, they're coming out very soon with it, but it's, you know, the water quality has to be better than it is now. The water quality standards are going up, and the amount that you can pump from your wells is going down. Okay, so, you know, we look at that and, okay, so it costs more to treat the water, and we have less revenue coming in. Unfortunately, what the state calls for is your water bill should be 1.5% of your town's median income, which puts our water bills up around, our average residential water bills, they're under $600 now, that puts them up at $1,200.
Like with the MWR.
I was gonna say, like you're
MWRA
lost in
thing.
exactly.
And they say, how are we not doing it?
We're
Raising
not doing
5% every year, you know, it's just, but
Yeah.
that's where their mindset is. So,
Absolutely,
you know, you have to, and I will say, I think we're ahead of the curve a little bit, because we do have our treatment plants in.
Right.
You know, we don't have.
And we've
you
had the
know,
drive to 65 conservation
Yes.
in place for years. But this is very similar to an unfunded mandate. Here, we want your quality to go up, you can't pump as much. Well, what about the well, you figure that out, you know? You figure out how to get the money.
Get another unfunded mandate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, Paul, getting back to what you said, this, you know, I just took an average, $100 per year. You can do, the way we do our rates, it's a step rate. The more you use, the more expensive it gets. You can do that with fixed charges too. You know, maybe your charge is $40.
Would that generate more revenue than $100 per customer?
Well, you can average
You can
100.
average, this is to give you an idea of what $100 does.
Paul's
to the
could be
bottom line.
40, you know, a year, and Ivan's could be, you know, $1.60, you know, because he uses more. You know, so you can do,
Right,
you can
yeah,
come
I
up
mean,
with things like that.
I'm sure a schedule could be drafted that way.
Right. But it would still be something that we would know, you know, be
Yeah.
assured that we would collect.
I know, but I don't use as much water, I use more water than he does, but he makes a whole lot more money than I do.
Yeah.
Now, how you gonna deal with that?
We're not getting into
I
that.
haven't met too many federal retirees that have made more money than, I don't know about that.
He's more able to pay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
All right, moving right along.
Let's go on, look at our cars in the parking lot, Alan.
Okay, so then, you know, looking at Plan 3, so anyway, in Plan 2, you can see that we didn't quite, you know, when we get out to that year 5, we're still negative. So then, year 3, I mean, Plan 3, what we did is looked at, you know, the Cobb's well is gonna be, you know, $2 million, go out and bond that $2 million. Okay, and then, you know, our bond payment goes up, but what it does is it gives you, you know, some relief from that one-time hit. Because it's, you know, to save that kind of money up in a short period of, you know, 3 to 5 years is gonna be really difficult. So, you know, we look at that bond issuance, and then you can see that we're, you know, we're still negative at the bottom, but we're you know, we're getting into the ballpark anyway. And then, you know, Plan 4, layered on top of that is if we did a 3% yearly rate increase. And then on top of that, which, you know, Ivan wants to address, is the cell tower funds that the Concom receives now that aren't spoken for with, you know, with some of the.
These are excess funds.
Excess funds.
Cell tower revenue.
And
excess
that's under,
funds.
if you look under revenue, you know, the 118,000 is what the water department gets now from the cell tower, their cell tower revenue. Underneath that would be the Concom excess cell tower money.
I don't know what that is. Can you explain that, Concom excess? Sorry.
That's it,
Conservation Commission.
yeah.
Well, back in 4 years ago,
Oh, the Conservation Commission, Concom is, okay, now I get it, sorry.
town meeting
Okay,
voted
Concom.
to
Yeah, that
have
was a company name.
cell tower funds.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Conservation land.
Right, that was
Conservation.
Longer than that.
at least 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was
at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and some of the funds the cell tower money funds are split. The water department gets some from,
The lakes cleanup, right?
Clean Lakes gets,
Clean Lakes
right,
gets
yeah,
some.
right.
And the Conservation Committee gets
Right.
some, so it's like third, and third.
Right.
And that was voted on at town meeting.
But the 118, is this what you end up with, or is that also some of the Clean Lakes come out of that?
The 118 is what we do, the
actually
water
get.
department actually get that right now.
Right.
So already the water rates are effectively subsidized to some extent by the cell tower money.
That is
Right,
correct.
exactly. They have been for several years.
That is
Yeah.
correct. And then then the line under that would be that excess money that the Concom is currently receiving.
So does that take into account all of the Concom money?
No, just the excess.
Right, it doesn't touch any of the money that's allocated for existing debt service today for land purchases.
But I mean, this is 100% of what Concom gets out of the cell tower. 100% of the excess.
Of the
Yeah.
excess.
Anything that's not committed.
It's all, it's
It's
not
everything that's
committed.
left,
Right.
is what they're asking.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Excuse me, Steve or Bonnie, do we have a schedule as to when the debt service is coming off on any of the conservation land that could then go back to conservation?
You get a lot of properties, so.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I'm wondering
I wonder.
if there isn't, if we could put together a table. Do you have it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this shows the debt service for the, against the cell towers for the Hartwell and Proudy land acquisitions.
Okay.
And basically, those are paid off in fiscal 2025.
Those are the oldest, right?
Right.
And then we have, there's 3 others, aren't there?
Okay, but for the next 10 years, I was wondering if there might be some money sort of coming off the
Oh, right,
dole,
okay,
which
okay.
then the Conservation Commission
Right,
could
right.
sort of put back into their pot,
Right.
but it's.
Well,
for the
also
next 10
remember-
years, it's not, yeah.
Remember too, that, that there's annual increases to that cell tower revenue, all right? When town meeting initially voted that, there was only so many carriers on the pole, so many cell companies. That number has increased over the last 10 years. And thus, the amount of money available has increased, plus the annual increases, plus the CPA wasn't around when that was voted in a town meeting. So there's been other sources of income going into that,
Yep.
into that fund.
So just a ballpark, how much do we spend for
Debt service?
debt service for conservation every year versus the
Um,
70 or 80,000 they're looking to try to take out of it?
Sure. It's about 74,000 in fiscal 2015 that's scheduled for debt service payments. And then it declines a little bit annually as we pay down the debt.
That's for all the conservation land that is coming off cell tower?
Yes.
Okay, so it's about equal to what Ivan is asking for?
Right.
Okay.
Case could be made, be the devil's advocate here, that the cell tower money, I mean, it comes to the water department because it has to be there, but it's town land and it's town revenue effectively, so it's really a question of whether it goes to Concom or the water department or B, C, or D, right? I mean, it's really just another way, how do you choose to use that revenue?
Right.
Is the right thing to do to put it to the water rates, or are there other places? Is it the right thing or not?
Yeah, and.
It is a discussion.
And if you think about
This is
it.
the holistic view, I keep coming back to,
Yeah,
right?
sure. And if you think about it, Cobb's Well, that area, Neshoba, a well that gets built there is now going to limit what you can do construction-wise. Now, all of a sudden, you've got another aquifer, you've got an area now that's protected. So, in essence, I know okay, it may sound like a reach,
Yeah.
but we've been buying a lot of land in town, okay? And I believe that this is a good use of money to have clean drinking water and also an automatic protection in that area with the development of that well. So, you know.
So if you go that route, I'm sorry.
Yeah, ballpark, how many acres would that be? Is it 2 acres or 20 acres or 50?
What's a zone radius from?
Well, the zone one's 400 feet. around the well, but I think that parcel up there is more like 4 acres, I think.
Okay.
It's-
Okay, so it's not a full 100 acres or something?
No.
It's 4
No,
acres.
no, but there's multiple zones, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it does stretch out further.
Okay.
Further.
Yeah, Zone 2 goes out, but that's not really, that's property that you can actually actively use. Like, there would be homes on that property.
Right, but you
and things
can't, you
like
can't
that.
do commercial, like petroleum base, you can't, I mean, there's a limit as to what you could
Yes,
build.
yeah, that's limited by the.
And that
by
zone
the
2
state.
radius is,
That is, that's another, I think, 800 feet beyond the 400.
okay.
I think.
So it seems to me, if you were gonna go down that way and make the kind of a argument or suggestion, or however you wanna call it, that you'd wanna somehow and I don't know whether you do this now, whether there's financial policies that say, like, that money is going for this. So that money is gonna go for this land or for that aquifer. Because I noticed on here, even when you talk about this debt service charge,
Yep.
it starts way here in 2015, and it's just going to operating expenses. It's not debt service charge at all. Out here it might be, but up here it's not. And you're not putting that money away for that either, right? So I think you want to get clear on line items and how they're being used, so it's real clear to people.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think our plan is to come up with a policy that our rates cover, like the O&M and the salaries.
Yep.
Then we have the debt service to pay off.
Yeah.
But then we have money that we need to put aside into surplus for capital projects.
Right.
Right.
So we have to, that's not being done right now.
Right.
Everything we collect, the connection fees through the rates, sprinkler demand charges, that's all going to the, just the operation. Hence, we lost $200,000 last year, so, and we just, we got a little bit of a break this year because we did, the bond for the new treatment plant, and we don't have a principal payment in this fiscal year. But that really kicks in next year.
Is that on here?
Under the debt service.
Under debt service, look at 2015 to 2016.
Oh, it goes to
Michelle.
400.
Yeah,
Well.
It goes 387 to 550
yeah, Jim, so.
at the top.
Sorry, up there, I got you.
Yeah, and
Okay.
one thing,
Yeah.
we're cognizant of and we're concerned about is our debt. And we certainly don't want to be maxing out our credit cards. And we know with Cobwell coming, there are projects we should be able to do and fund with revenue that we already have. We shouldn't have to go out and bond it. Okay, that's something that we need to get a very good handle on and do a good job with going forward. And that's, what we've tasked, Scott to do is look at all these scenarios where we can get cash to do, for instance, the Cedar Hill. We should be able to do that in-house and not have to borrow for a project like that. Doing the well, okay, that's, understand that. That's a major project, or like the upgrade with well number 2. But these other projects, no, we should be able to do that in-house.
And so to some extent, the rates just need to reflect what it costs to deliver the water that you're doing. I mean, it's really kind of what some of this comes down to, right?
I mean, the simple answer is always, just raise the rates. Just raise the rates. But, we're always cognizant of being, one of the lowest in the area, on the electric side, lowest in Massachusetts. We do that for a reason. Okay, we do that for the ratepayer in town here.
Right.
We want to continue that level of service and keep the rates as low as possible.
Yeah, we do have some ideas, some internal things that we can do to raise some revenue too. We had a monitoring well program with all the commercial industrial customers that has been kind of dropped over the last 5 or 6 years, that we're going to get that going again. We do that internally. We, with all the special permits that all these commercial industrial customers have, we test, they have to pay for the test. We can make some money on that, Like I said, we've raised our sprinkler demand charges up. We do backflow testing. So we're going to look at ways of, raising revenue that way. So we're, every little bit helps you know? And, you know, we're trying to do as much in-house as we can. Everybody knows we're kind of under a crunch right now, so.
Scott, do you have your own testing facility, or do you
No.
send it out?
We can test certain things, but for actually certified tests, we have to send it out.
Does the drive to 65, the conservation, does that impact your revenue very much, really? Percentage-wise, or do you just have enough growth that it kind of counterbalances that, or?
Well, we're well under the 65, which is, the state likes that. You know, I mean, if we were pushing the 65, we would be in trouble. So we definitely have some room there. The conservation programs that have been put in place, you know, with the water restrictions and things like that in the summer have helped. But the state's coming out with a new Water Management Act. It probably will be about out the end of this year. Luckily, we just had the water department's run on a 5-year cycle. We just had our inspections and everything done like 6 months ago. So we're gonna have a little bit of a grace period before that kicks in. But yeah, it's you know, that's what they're gonna look at. That they look at for unaccounted for water. They want you to be below 10%. So they look at what you pump and what you sell and where else everything is going. So we're looking at that real hard, because ours is up around 15%. You know, is it water leaks? Is it metering errors?
It's at
You know.
Paul's house.
You gotta check his
It's supposed to run forward.
Break it.
Yeah. So those are things that, you know, in the future, if you're above the 10%, you can get penalized. They can reduce how much water you pump. And I mean, it's really, it's
Like the
really.
65 too, the
Oh, yeah.
65 gallon, they
Oh, yeah.
can penalize you.
How do you
And-
find those areas where you're losing water?
Leak detection. We do our own leak detection, and then we hire, the DEP wants you to hire a company every 3 years to come out and do leak detection, you know, to find leaks. We've really, what we've started to do with the grant we just got from DEP that we did this last spring, we did meter calibration of all our pumping stations, and we did find some errors there. So, you know, we weren't pumping as much as we thought we were. So, you know, that helped out a little bit there. But, you know, you look at, you know, they do excuse you for water breaks when you flush the system. You know, your spring and fall flushing, they excuse you for that to a, you know, a certain extent. But yeah, a lot of it's in metering and leaks is really what you have to look at. So it just takes some legwork.
Are the water commissioners going to be considering a rate increase at this point? Are you bringing forward a rate increase to them, or, I mean, is that in the works?
The goal here is to, you know, we're getting as much feedback as possible, so that next week, we're going to start discussing options. Because, you know, myself personally, I don't think there's one solution,
Oh, no, absolutely.
one source
No.
that we can say, yeah, this solves the problem. So it's a little bit from different places. Now it's just, you know, we're going to talk internally about, you know, what the various options are and thresholds and whatnot. You know, we're throwing this out to you guys too, and get some feedback, you know, on your side as well. What you're seeing here tonight.
I think what Scott brought forward to you guys was a really excellent first round. And I think, you know, you signing off on those two items
Yep.
was absolutely the right thing to do.
Right.
And now you're trying to, you know, pick and choose
Yeah.
where you look at revenue and how you do it. So I think it's the right thing to do. But,
Yeah, over time, we've been fortunate that good management and everything else has allowed us to deal with problems on a one-off basis, but, you know, those days are over for a variety of reasons, so I echo what Fred says, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I brought forward just, you know, at the last few meetings, some of the, we looked at where our rates were and compared them to other towns. And then I brought forward to the commissioners, like, you know, if we change this, this is the revenue we get. We started looking at that, and they said, okay, well, you know what? Let's look at 5 years. Let's just keep a constant 5-year look ahead, so that we can see where we go, so it's not just a snapshot in time. So that's what this is, and they'll start that discussion next week, and look at, what the different steps,
Right.
we can take.
Right. And part of the reason why we wanted that was because of the Cobb well. That's the elephant in the room. That's coming, so you have to have it on the table.
I'd also just add that I was really happy that Scott and I sat down the last few weeks and went through this, but I just remind you that anything that is a deficit in the water fund has to be raised annually on the tax recap, so it's a direct impact if there is a deficit, and there hasn't been since I've been here. But if there is, it's a direct hit to the town operation too. So it is something that DOR looks at very closely annually in November when we set the rate, so thank you.
So wouldn't that be the situation if we did raise it 3% yearly? Like, right? In 16, we're gonna be in a deficit? Are we reading this right? Or,
Which one are you looking at?
The last one.
In 16.
actually, it's gonna still be, even option 4, it's still gonna be a deficit in 16 and
16
17.
because of,
Well, yeah, the new
again,
debt service probably coming on, right?
But you'd be drawing down the reserve,
No,
so they
that-
wouldn't.
Okay, all right, so they would, okay, all right. So, all right, yeah, okay. So as long as
That's not-
their reserves don't go in deficit.
We didn't
Okay,
do that.
not on a
service for that,
yearly
Just for Cobb's.
budget sense,
Right,
Okay.
last year was a good example. Last year, their expenses exceeded their revenues. But they had a buffer, they had a reserve of about
Right.
300,000, which has been drawn down to about 100,000 now, so.
So if they had 199 deficit this year, they'd be in trouble. They'd have to come out of our base. But
That's
because
right.
if this is projecting a
Right.
surplus next year,
Right.
that would get you ready to take the next year.
exactly. And what we're trying to show here is that, the Cedar Hill work that needs to take place, we don't want to borrow for that.
Yeah.
We'd love to have a scenario where the next big borrowing we would do would be Cobb's well. And everything else, we do in-house, so we're not borrowing.
And it is interesting, though, knowing that the water department is going to have big investments you need to make, that in the past, that there was never any reserves, because that wasn't done that way, right?
Well,
Just,
there was.
okay, they just got used up already.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and part of the issue is that, we had tried last year a scenario for treatment number 2. We were looking to, the excess cell tower revenue, we were going to do solar panel installation at the transfer station and the light department. We tried to work.
I remember that.
Yeah, right,
Right,
remember
work
that, yeah,
that
right,
out.
yeah.
And that didn't happen. So, a year ago, we were looking at ways, because again, treatment number
You do,
2,
Right,
that big hit,
yeah,
next year.
Right.
So
okay,
it's,
it is what it is.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think Bonnie's point about the deficit comes out of town, I mean, that comes back to the holistic thing again about you raise the taxes here, you raise rates here, somehow or another, people are paying for this stuff, it's just a matter of how you how you're gonna put it, and we do appreciate, obviously, that you're trying very hard to keep everything you can to find appropriate revenues to
Right.
keep the rates down.
Right.
But in the
Right.
end, it's still,
Right. Yeah.
there's no magic. Keith?
I just want to make a couple of comments. One was on the use of the cell tower funds, which we all know has its own dynamic in the community. I had raised the issue a year ago when we were looking at we thought we might have the solar farm.
Right.
The solar array, the thought was, well, then let's take the cell tower funds, that the solar array funds we get, the cell tower funds you got,
Right.
but the solar array funds, it was, the selectmen recognized, we had to put that, since it's an additional revenue source, and it's sort of replacing what we're doing for purchasing open space, which is the purpose for which the cell tower funds are going now on the town side. The thought was to put those funds into the Community Preservation Fund to increase the base for the state match. Because frankly, every dollar you put in, you get at current rates between 25 and 35 cents per, for additional state match. So from a global perspective, it's worth figuring out some revenue, appropriate revenues to put in there. We've got a proposal on the table right now to do that with 15 Great Road mitigation funds to some degree as perhaps the means of funding the turf design cost, which is currently at about $200,000. And we're looking at a, you know, if there's going to be a petitioned article coming forward for turf funds, for turf design funds for $200,000, then it behooves us to figure out the best way to be able to pay for those at the lowest cost for the town. Putting them in the community preservation fund is one way to do that. And I think that needs to be in the mix, the global discussion about what happens to if we're doing something different with the cell tower funds. Certainly town meeting is not going to just roll over and say, go ahead, take the money, without some larger plan in place. That's one point. The other point is, I know that there was a Water Infrastructure Commission at state level that our state senator chaired, and that there were a bunch of reforms and recommendations that came out of that. But I recall one of the findings was that, and it's not just Littleton, that there are many water departments across the Commonwealth that chronically underfund the revenue by not having water rates that are high enough. And if you, to cover the cost, there's no, I mean, right now, the rate structure puts nothing aside for a capital reserve. It's all, it's it's hand to mouth. It's balancing the budget each and every year, and the closer you get to balancing, the closer you are to being out of balance. And at that point, the difference gets made up ultimately by the property tax. So I think it's worth looking at what the information is what's happening across the state, that there are many communities that don't raise enough in water rates. We can be proud of low water rates, but we don't want to be in a situation where the water rates aren't raising enough to cover the water costs. That's not something to be proud of. So, and that's what we're all trying to avoid. So that is, and it all comes from somewhere. It either comes from the additional revenues that we generated or the basic functions, taxpayers and ratepayers.
Yeah, I would say, Keith, that you're right. There are other municipalities that are in the same boat, but they're actually in worse shape because they haven't upgraded their facilities. Okay, so there's a doomsday coming.
Yeah.
Where now they've got to go out and spend several $1 million for a treatment facility, and where's that coming from? We've, as Scott said, we've been, technology and updating, we're in pretty good shape, with that, with the recent well number 2. But I hear what you're saying. I don't really worry about other towns. and as long as, I tend to look at it as, what, in our surrounding area, what are the rates and how are they raising, money, as the debt service charge, as an example. Okay, that's something that, other towns are doing. But I hate to sit back and just say, okay, well, yeah, let's just go ahead and raise the rates, and that's going to bring in the revenue, and okay, we can balance everything out. I like to be more creative as much as possible and exhaust every option before going to the ratepayer and saying you have to brunt the whole load, everything. So, and I get what you're saying with the CPC and the match, and I get all that.
Yeah. They're all pieces that fit together.
Absolutely.
And being, for example, I thought the idea last year, we all wish the solar array thing.
Yep.
Would have worked, because that's great.
Right.
That's
Yep.
just the
Very
outside the
creative.
box thinking
Yep. That's right.
that will help to get us through the next level.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
And we're all in it together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Reports back.
Any feedback back that you want us to take for our meeting next Wednesday? We're going to discuss and then we'll report back, but is there anything that is?
You heard my piece.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, I just, again, clarifying like debt service charge, if it's really $100 per year through here, then it's really not debt service, because in the beginning it's operating revenue to me, so unless you're assuming that's going to.
You want us to
profile,
take a
things like-
look at
Just
other
that it's
options?
just the whole, one of the major premises we do from a town financial is, one-time revenues go to one-time things kind
Right.
of stuff. So you don't mix up
Yep.
the operating revenues with that, because it just makes things a lot cleaner, so that's one thing there. And then, I mean, just on a personal level, I still look at the cell tower money subsidizing water rates when it's kind of town money. It's not wrong, it's just it's kind of back to the holistic thing again, okay, so it's money coming in. So that's one thing we could do with it, and maybe that's the right thing, and maybe that's what
Right.
town wants to do.
Right.
But you could, and the economist in me says, you're subsidizing the water rates with cell tower money, and it doesn't make any sense. But it's fine, it's, it's a policy, and if that's how we choose to do it, that's great. It's just-
Right.
If the overriding problem we've had historically is we haven't had capital reflected in the rate, then why not just adjust the rate to solve the problem, rather than leaving the rate sacrosanct and putting on a surcharge? I mean, that seems to me like kind of strange. It's punishing those who are doing their best not to
Well,
use a lot.
but let's also remember,
Consistent with
Paul,
state
that-
policies and goals, and
Right.
rewarding those who use a lot.
Right, but the other side of it too is, the state's saying you can only use so much, you can only pump so much, so we can't get more revenue, And I think if you look at that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, if we look at that model and we say, okay, our amount that we can pump and we can make is not going up.
No, but you can raise the
Okay,
rates.
but that number may be astronomical, as far as a bump in this situation, in this time frame. That might be a huge, I mean, you heard what Scott was saying, the numbers, if you look at what the state says, we should be at $1,200, on average.
Well,
I mean, that's.
your needs don't
That's
dictate
huge.
that.
No, no.
Yeah, with that, with a $100 customer debt service, we're, shy of $700 in the total rate. That still doesn't get us there, though.
Right.
It still doesn't get us there. Luckily, like in the next few years, this year, next year, we've got some development, so we do have some connection fee money. And, like Betsy, like you said, that should be money that gets
Yeah.
set aside for future capital.
Right.
It isn't planned that way right now, the way the budget was for this year, that those connection fees were gonna be used to pay our O&M and our debt service and all that. So, we have to kind of readjust things so that the money we get in is going toward, what it's supposed to. With it, I look at cell tower money, that can go away. We have carriers that,
That's
and their
why it's a
leases.
one-time, you gotta look at it as one-time money.
Exactly, that can go away. They're 5-year leases, but we've had them drop off. We've tried to replace them, and you don't get them for a year or two. So that's not, with technology and everything, that's not really guaranteed money either. So that shouldn't really be built into our base rate. So,
Capital thing if you do it. Okay, all right.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Take up
Appreciate
a
it.
collection.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
communicating is good. Is that your water?
Yes, oh, yes, thank you.
Out of that 15%.
Okay. Okay, good discussion, huh? Interesting thing.
Scott's doing a good job.
Yep. Tough business when you have to convince your customers to buy less of your product, though, huh? It's a tough business to be in, it really is, right? Conserve, buy less of our product. What's that?
And pay the same amount.
Right, yeah, right.
Doesn't sound like Paul can buy in the West.
That's why you get punished. for
I think
being
your
slow.
your meter's getting checked next, I think.
We were there today, actually.
All right, I had on my agenda just an update on the policies and procedures meeting, which we had right before here. It was mostly kind of new people and getting restructured again, or starting to get structured, although we still have a lot of work to do. terms of the formality or informality of the group and some of that. We have a lot of things on our priority list, which I'll organize and put those together. And we're going to have another short meeting. I guess there are also, the scope's expanding a little bit. It turns out that there are other financial policies that the town has for some other things. The one that came up today has to do with the OPEB investment policy, and there's some other ones as well. So Steve brought that to us to review. We didn't have a lot of time today, so we're gonna redo that before the joint Board of Selectmen meeting next week. Finish that one off. But so you'll hear more about the policies and procedures as we go forward. Today it was kind of mostly a get to know you kind of meeting, I think, for the most part, right? And Paul gave us a history of how we got there. And
We did cover the substance of the OPEB policy, but that was all new to us.
right. And yeah. Okay. So that's that. Bonnie, what do you have for us?
I just provided you, again, with the memo that I went over with the selectmen and the finance committee at the joint meeting again. I didn't know if you had any questions on it, or if you needed me to answer anything specific, but I did provide it in the packet. Aside from that, I also provided you with an update of the warrant, and it looks like this, the starting page, as it sits today. There have been some very recent changes, or draft changes that are being discussed as it relates to the turf field discussion. So I've given you the summary list of what's been inserted to date, and the amounts. What is still kind of outstanding there has not been inserted, but might be at the next selectmen's meeting next week.
Yeah, what is the expectation on the turf fields? They apparently want something in the order of $200,000 to do design work on these things, which, again, it sounds like CPC is agreeing to fund. For
Not yet.
$200,000 design, you're gonna be spending $1.5 million or $1.8 million or whatever
Yeah, I
it
would
is.
say.
1.8.
What's the assumption on that? Is CPC gonna fund the $1.8 million? Or is this gonna come back with, oh, well, we already spent $200,000 on a design of fields, we better not waste that $200,000 in doing override for fields? I mean, what is the expectation at this point?
I think that's a discussion for this meeting at the joint Board of Selectmen on Monday.
So there's really no,
No, the $200,000 figure came from the discussion around 10% for $2 million in improvements for the turf fields. What I've done is I've issued to Gale Associates and Green International, who are the engineering firms that are most familiar with these types of projects that the town uses, a request to provide me with a quote by Friday at noon on this type of a project. So I don't know that this 200,000 is even reasonable or not.
okay.
I'm hoping that it's not. I'm hoping that it would be less than that, but, until we see them on Friday, we won't really have a good idea.
By the last PMVC meeting I attended, there was a discussion about a feasibility study. Is that still in the works, or are we bypassing that and going directly to design?
No, the group, the turf group, and for lack of a better term, did not want a feasibility study. I think that was something that was erroneously recommended or something by the planning board. I'm not sure how that happened, but they wanted to have the design work done. That was their original request. And so somehow it came up to a feasibility study. And then in the last few days, it's been, those are existing fields. We don't need a feasibility study to determine whether they're adequate sites. We want to get the design work done. And their goal, again, the turf group's goal is to have it installed next summer. So they want to have the design work done now to be able to go to spring and have the project voted on as an item.
My position would be before I spend, whether it's 200,000 or even 35,000, I'd want to know if the answer is yes, then how is the rest of it going to get funded?
And I think
That
that's
needs to be,
the discussion.
before we spend that has to happen.
Well, aren't we in the same
So
situation
we don't
with the
usually do
fire
it that way,
station?
though.
Isn't the fire station the exact same situation? We haven't figured out how to fund that, right?
Also true.
Right? That's 6.8 million.
They're both coming out at the same time.
Both coming up at the same time, right? So,
Yes.
Depends on who
Yeah.
spends all their time,
but-
who goes to town meeting, which
Right.
gets through.
Mhm.
be interesting meeting. No, so we have a joint meeting with the selectmen on the 22nd? is that-
Correct.
okay.
And we tried to group all these items together on the agenda so that they're spaced one after the other, so you won't be hanging out.
So in addition to those, there is some time for us to talk about the budget process again, priorities. I would not expect them to come up and say, here are our list of 5 top priorities. We have what the Board of Selectmen's priorities are for the year, not budget related, we have those.
So the directive, I was going to request the board to issue the directive, being mindful of their stated goals, so that the departments would coordinate their budgets around their stated goals and submit them as such. And then they would, again, meet with the departments after that to kind of go through their budgets, as they did last year.
And if you look through the goals, they're actually kind of interesting. I mean, roads is on there, a lot of the things we've talked about, the financial policies is in there, and there's other things in there that are,
Right.
so if it's really done in that context, it could be an interesting, some interesting discussions that come from that.
And the turf, the discussion around the funding for the turf fields, they, at least for this draft, they were looking at the mitigation funds that were, or the host community agreement funds from Omni 15 Great Road.
Oh, okay, right now it
So
makes
there's
sense.
100,000 that was deposited for active recreation, specifically for active recreation. And then there's another 250,000 that was unallocated, but for, community use. So the proposal is right now, or at least the discussion is right now, to use those funds for whatever the design cost would be. There's also been some discussion of, might be advantageous to deposit those monies into the CPC fund
Right,
to get the
the
match and get it out, but I think that there's not the surety that CPC would be supportive of doing that right now, or, so that's gonna be part of the discussion Monday.
And it's 3 fields, right? It's not just 2?
It's two that they talked about 3 initially, they've
Oh, okay,
narrowed it
so I
down,
was
so it's
wondering, 'cause I
reduced
saw
to
it the
2. The alumni fields and the field up at the high school.
What could possibly be CPC's concern about that?
I think-
About increasing their money by a third
I don't
with no effort?
Right. I don't think the concern is over the increase. I think the concern is over the expenditure. Is this the right recreation project for CPC? Are there other recreation projects or other, active
Yeah,
recreation?
well, there's the ongoing one
That's what they should
down
ask.
here
So that's what the hesitancy is.
Absolutely what they should ask.
that we're
Not
still
that this
hunting
isn't the
money
right
for, right?
It's just that we know that this, that there is the sense that the group is motivated and has rallied the troops, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, so that there appears to be some constituency behind
Well,
appearing at town
They
meeting.
can always get a vote at town meeting.
Right. So we want the right vote at town meeting.
Yeah,
Well,
but I'm saying,
But the point is, that the point isn't the where does the money come from, this design study. The point is, if we do it, where does the money come from the turf fields?
Right.
And that's got to be the total discussion to me. Because it's easy to say, oh, yeah, let's use this mitigation money to pay for that. It's like it's free money, which it isn't, of course. But are people willing to
Well, then,
do a override or
Debt exclusion.
debt exclusion?
Yeah,
well,
to
they're
say,
they're
Pay
not.
for it, which is really, I mean, I'll say, I mean, nobody's saying it, but that's what the answer is.
They
right?
will
Well,
vote
you're
for
gonna do $1
this at
million.
town meeting because it doesn't cost them
I
anything.
know, but that's.
But then after the money's spent and you come back for the other
Yeah,
$1,800,000,
We already spent it.
then you're gonna have a fight on your hands at town meeting.
yeah.
Well, I thought the $1.8 million included the design fee.
Or $1,600,000. Well,
Yeah.
It's only 2 instead of
I'm
3,
looking
maybe
at
it's $1
$2
million.
million and
too.
200,000.
Maybe it's $1 million.
I thought the million, whatever,
You're not
million
doing
and
it
a
with a
half
bake
was
sale
for free.
regardless, right? It's not happening with car washes and bake sales.
The $1.8 million was for the 3 fields,
Yeah.
but again, I don't know how good that number was. I don't.
Yeah, yeah,
We don't know.
right, right.
We don't know.
We'll
We don't know
find
what the
out,
number's gonna
right?
be.
We'll find out.
Before we go to the town
Right.
asking for any amount of money, we should, whoever's proposing it, and if we're, asked to back it, should be there to explain what the whole funding plan is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
And until we're ready to do that, we shouldn't be going forward with it.
And then beyond that,
They were here, were you here?
I was here.
I think that
They
there's,
didn't know, they just wanted to do it.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, they were going around saying hello to everybody, which I think is the appropriate thing. The next step is, deciding on the funding, if indeed, and, where it falls into the level of priorities too.
and then beyond that, who who takes ownership of it once it's done? What department?
Because
School
they've got the
department?
annual maintenance of some level.
Yeah.
Right.
That, you know, there is.
I did include that as part of, you'll get that from from PMBC, but I did
You're
include
right.
that as part of the scope, to
Okay.
identify what the maintenance costs
the,
are.
Yeah, at least we'll know what it costs, not necessarily who's gonna pay it.
And I believe that if, well, I know that there's a citizens petition article for this, if, you know, if they have it ready to go in case things fall apart, they want it to get on the warrant.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's the democratic way, but
Yep.
it's, at this point, it seems like the cart's ahead of the horse, that's all.
Well, they have that hard deadline in front of them, too. That's what's
Right.
pushing everything, right?
Right.
Getting it done.
No, I just want to make you aware of all
No, thank you.
the moving
Absolutely.
parts.
Very important.
So I didn't know if you had any questions on the warrant, other than the turf items. Those are the only real new ones, new developments. I don't think anything else has changed since the last time you saw it.
The TIF, what do you know about that?
I know that right now the assessors are looking at what the actual impact was for FIBA Technologies, the last few TIFs, and getting that to the board for Monday so that they can have that as part of
Do
the
we have any
discussion.
background on this 3 distribution center circle project? What's the rationale, the need?
My understanding is, and I'll go through my emails and see if I can forward you the information that I have, but it's, the company is only looking to locate here if they can get a TIF. And if they cannot, they will not locate here.
And who's been in the loop so far? Because we had, in the past, had a process where we agreed upon that, you know, there would be a review group, including finance committee representation.
I think right now the inquiry was just made to the selectman's office, and that's why
Right.
it's on the agenda for.
Well, it's
this
already
coming-
on the warrant, though.
Right, well, it's held, it's not inserted. The board has not voted to insert it. It's just a draft to hold placement, and they're gonna meet on it on Monday to, I think, recommend that the group be tasked
And
with.
maybe at that time we'd have information to review.
Right, yep. So the assessors are working on the impact now, and we should have more information for Monday. Actually, we'll have it Friday.
Okay. In terms of the budget process, we have a meeting next week anyway, right? Yeah, we do. Okay, so we can talk about it then anyway. So we're going to talk about when, send things out and when we would start talking to the department heads, because we need to give them time to actually start putting their budgets together before we go out and talk to them. But we can talk about that next week.
It's
really.
all in here in the proposal, Bonnie's proposal anyway. I think we kind of hashed it out at the joint meeting, the last joint meeting.
Yeah, I send
Yeah,
generally the
just a-
Is any
documents.
tweaking?
Yeah, just the more specifics of like when we actually go start talking to people and so on, things like that.
There's no changes in the schedule, right? We still.
Yeah, no, that's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't
I did
changed.
reserve the room at the police station for
Oh, thank you very
Super
much.
Saturday.
Okay.
Are we sticking with the original date on that one? I know there was a subject raised that was a conflict.
No, it was November 15th. Sticking with that. Yep. Okay. Do we have minutes from, you sent them out from,
They went out.
I know.
I still do not have the minutes from Peter on July 1st.
but he said he sent them before the last meeting.
No,
but
he said he
didn't.
had to. Paul had sent them on the phone, over his phone.
To somebody,
However,
yeah.
Diane could not open them, I could not open them, Jen could not open them.
So
None of us. So
So
we-
Peter
maybe if
still
I
has
send it
them.
from my computer,
Well,
you want me
Peter
to
should
try?
have it, too.
Yeah, Peter should have it too.
Yeah, and so I've been asking Peter every time, I sent him an email right after that, and I've been asking him whenever I see him.
Helpful, okay.
I just, yeah.
So the July 1st
The
minutes?
July, is while I was away.
Yeah.
All right, and so the minutes we have open now that you did send was from which, I forget which.
August 26th, I think the date is. Yep,
Is that wrong?
August 26th.
26th? Okay, so, we've all seen the minutes from the August 26th meeting.
I was not present, so.
Right, it says that you were absent.
Yep.
Any further updates? And you've already
I've
said you
made
sent
all
the
the
corrected ones,
corrections.
right?
Yep.
Okay? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 26th as written.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Like that. All right.
Motion adjourned.
And we have a meeting next week, too?
We
Second.
have a joint meeting on Monday with the selectmen.
Right.
Yeah, is that it?
Wait a
Do
minute.
we-
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
No, when is
Keep it.
our next meeting?
Next Tuesday.
It is, that's what I
Okay,
thought,
that's
the
right.
23rd. That's, I just want,
But we have a meeting on
23rd.
Monday with the selectmen as
And
well.
we're posted.
And we're posted, or we will be.
Yep.
Okay, now, you made a motion to adjourn,
I'll second the motion.
okay? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good, off to a good start.